Good evening. My name is Jeff Gallo. I'm a partner with Brennan Fender CPA, as well as a co-founder of CEO Leadership Forums. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and meet us at this grand location. We had an event here last November, as a matter of fact, almost 1 year ago, and we were actually over on that side, and we were talking about the 2026 World Cup and if Orlando was going to get that, and we didn't get it, unfortunately. But CEO Leadership Forums is a group that is composed of all these wonderful brand names. We've been putting on C-level events for literally the last 7 years. We co-partner with Valencia College, and you're going to meet several people today. I'd like my Valencia College comrades to stand up. I've got Jared Caliquet. He'll be our host. Jared Cutter. Okay, Paul Wilder is somewhere over here, and so is Nasser Hidayat. But they have been wonderful partners. As you know, we support Valencia College students. We have pledged $100,000. We're pretty close to that number right now. Scholarships for students in their baccalaureate program for business, as well as software development, as well as some others. And we try to be a connection between the college and potential employers, which are second stage businesses, many of whom are in this audience right now. And those are companies with less than 200 employees and less than $50 million in revenue. And those are our clients, and we try to fill whatever we can to help them get the talent they need, especially during these really hard times. So I speak about our mission. I speak about the connection of the college and getting students into small businesses, and talk about mastermind opportunities. We have put on at least 60. Mo, how many events have you filmed? I've lost track since 2016, but they're an awful lot. If you want to go to our website and see past events, you're going to see a cadre of speakers that are fantastic. And so more of what we've been doing recently is events like this that are more social in nature. They're 2-hour events, not 4.5-hour events, and we realized that COVID changed the rules of how we can do things like this. So one of the things that we thought about for the end of the year was to talk about the economy post-election. And certainly I can't think of a better opportunity to do this. And I asked my good friend Glenn Griffiths of Raymond James Financial to ask our guest speaker, who is the chief economist for Raymond James. So we're getting it right, fresh, and early. And for the next 50 minutes, he's going to share about what he sees and what the data shows. And at this point, I don't know, Jared, I don't know if you wanted to introduce him or were prepared to.
I wasn't, but I can.
All right, but I'm going to introduce my very good friend, Jared Caliquet, PhD, and he is actually the founding professor for the Business and Organizational Leadership degree at Valencia College, and he is going to actually moderate the panel that is going to follow. So, Jared, please.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Let's give a hand to Jeff and all the work he does for this organization. As Jeff mentioned, I teach in the Bachelor's of Business and Organizational Leadership program. It's a 4-year program at Valencia. I'm excited to be here and be able to moderate a great panel later on. It's really exciting prepping for it, so I'm really excited for you all to witness it and experience it. But without further ado, we have the chief economist of Raymond James. And I don't know if you've got a chance to look at this stuff, but it's pretty dynamite information, and it's going to put us all ahead of the curve on what's coming. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Eugenio Almi. Dr. Eugenio.
Thank you. How are you? Oh, I have to take this thing. Oh, okay, good. I hope that this works. But thank you for the invitation to speak to the group. Very happy. I'm based in St. Petersburg, so I just drove from St. Pete's here. And I realized that T-Mobile doesn't have a good signal in the I-4. So that is not good news for T-Mobile. But anyway, I was in traffic for a long time, so I started trying to call my friends and family, but to no avail. I mean, my father would say always, when I call him, are you at an airport, isn't it? Because you only call me when you are at an airport and you have nothing to do with. So this is what's happening to me in the middle of traffic at I-4. So anyway, let me try to make sense of what is happening today, because I was talking to some of you today, and this is probably the most telegraphed recession in the history of the U.S. Everybody knows, or presumably knows, that a recession is coming. But normally when markets know that something is going to happen, it doesn't happen, correct? Because everybody tries to adjust to the event. We still think that the Fed is going to bring interest rates so high that they are going to create a recession. And some sectors of the economy, especially those who are very interest rate sensitive, are almost close to a recession, like the housing market. But the rest of the economy is not doing bad. And I'll talk about that. But before going there, I was born in Argentina, but I was raised in Puerto Rico. And I have been in between Puerto Rico, Argentina, and the States for all my life. That's why I have an accent, so you don't have to try to fix your dial. I do have an accent, but as an Argentinian, if there's anybody that knows about inflation, is an Argentinian, correct? So, but during my professional career, this is the first time that I actually talk about inflation. Actually, I did my thesis in hyperinflation and inflation in Argentina, but that was the last time that I talked about inflation until now, right? So, and this is what has been happening, and this is a very, very long series. You can see that it goes back to the 1960s, just to have a perspective of what has been happening lately, yes? So, and again, I have two rectangles at this time and back in the 1970s and 80s, just to try to kill this idea that we are in a stagflation process. Because, I hear a lot of economists and reporters and analysts that, I don't know if it is because they want to get on the news, that they are always trying to come up with a term that will catapult them into infamy? Infamy? Yes. But, I mean, this idea that we are in a stagflation process is ludicrous, correct? Not because we cannot be in the process of going into stagflation, but because we are not at stagflation today. So this is not the first time that I try to compete with other people, but so now she's coming this way. So stagflation. What is stagflation? Stagflation is a combination of stagnation plus very high prices. So stagflation. That is what we have to have. How do we measure stagnation? Well, stagnation is measured by the economy growing less than what the potential of the economy to grow is, correct? So if the economy is growing less than potential output, then that is called stagnation. So this is what was happening back in the 1970s and 80s. The US economy was growing by about 2.4%, but potential output was 4%. So 70s and 80s was a period of stagnation. Normally, when you have very low growth, inflation is very low. Yes? Because you're growing below potential, there's no reason for prices to go up. But the fact of the matter was that back in the 70s and 80s, we were growing below potential, and at the same time, inflation was very high. That's why they coined this term, stagflation, a combination of stagnation plus inflation. Is this what is happening today? No, it's not. The US economy has grown today by about 5% in the last 2 years. What is the potential for US economic growth today? 1.8%. Oh, you say, this is political. Now you change the potential because you're a Democrat or whatever, yes, or you are a... No. You know, the potential output is measured given the resources available for the US economy. Population growth back in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s was 2.5%. Today is 1%. At least, I mean, more or less 1% growth in population. And basically, labor or population growth is one of the biggest factors for growth. Yes, it's one of the most important resources of the economy. So population growth is growing very slowly, thus potential output growth is very low. So we have a potential output of 1.8, but we grew by 5%. That means that inflation should be very high. There is no way around it because we are growing up above potential. Yes? Anytime that we grow above potential, inflation goes up. But anytime that we grow below potential, we can have stagflation. But we are not there yet. I'm not saying that we are not going to be there, or we might not be there, but we are not there yet. Yes? So you can see that before the stagflation process, inflation started to get unhinged back in 1965. That is when inflation starts to move up. And it started moving up there, and then a recession, prices went down, then the Fed decreased interest rates again, inflation went up again, and then recession went down, and so this process of inflation was building for more than 10 years before stagflation occurred. This is not what is happening today. We have been in a process of very, very low prices, very, very low inflation. That's why I haven't talked about it before last year. Yes? What we were fighting before was deflation, which is an overall decline in prices. This is the reason why the Federal Reserve has been very, very vocal and very, very active in having interest rates very, very low during this period, correct? Because inflation, they were not fighting inflation, they were fighting deflation, yes? And that is the reason why they have been so adamant about controlling that process. Because, you know, the Federal Reserve knows how to beat inflation, but they have no clue of how to beat deflation. So they went all out to prevent a deflation, and then they say, well, okay, so let's, after 2008, they say, okay, so let's do this. If inflation starts to go up, we are going to wait a little. Big mistake, correct? Because, I mean, it wasn't a big mistake because they were wrong in their analysis. The problem is that they never expected a pandemic to hit. Yes? So when the pandemic hit, they should have increased interest rates. But imagine, in the middle of the pandemic depression, if the Federal Reserve tries to increase interest rate when everybody was getting out of their jobs, nobody could work, imagine the problems, political problems that they would have had. It was almost impossible to do it. But they should have done it, but they waited too much. So let me show you this, and this is one of the biggest differences. So inflation has been high in previous periods. You can see it back in 2008 when petroleum prices were at $130 per barrel and gasoline prices were very high. Remember $4 per gallon back in the early 2000s? We were going crazy about it. So inflation did increase, and you can see how inflation started to increase, and it was almost 6% before the Great Recession. But the difference is that if you look at this measure, which is this lighter line, that is core prices, which is inflation if you subtract energy prices and food prices. So the Federal Reserve say, look, energy prices and food prices are very volatile. So you can see how they go up and down, up and down. But what we are interested in looking at is core prices. And core prices were not moving at all during the Great Recession. Actually, they were coming down. That is the biggest difference between this period and that period. Inflation, the headline inflation is very high, but the core inflation is also very high. And that is when they say, okay, we are in trouble now, and we are going to start increasing interest rates. Why? Okay. Oops. Because this is what they fear the most, expectations. So this is a University of Michigan survey of inflation expectations. And they measure two types of inflation expectations, 12 months ahead and 5 years ahead. So 5 years ahead is relatively very stable. Yes, this is what people believe inflation is going to be in the next 5 years. What is not stable is short-term inflation expectations. And you can see that today, short-term or next year inflation expectations is very close to what is today. It was very close to 2008. So 1 year ahead, why? Because oil prices and petroleum prices and gasoline prices were very high. So people thought inflation is going through the roof, yes? But you can see that long-term inflation expectations remain relatively constrained. What has happened this time is that you can see that during the pandemic recession, 5 years ahead, inflation expectations declined, and then they started to creep up again. And this is when the Federal Reserve said, okay, it is time for us to move because this is problematic. Why inflation expectations are problematic, especially long-term? The reason is because if you start to think that inflation is going to be very high in the future, you will start asking for higher wages. Yes? So higher wages, if you are asking for higher wages in a very tight labor market, firms are normally going to give it to you. And then if firms increase wages, then they have to cover those increases in wages, and they raise prices of their products, correct? So that is what they want to cut. Not your wages and salaries, but that expectation that inflation is starting to build in the decision-making process. That is what they want to cut from the roots. And you can see what has been happening to wages and salaries. This is increases in nominal wages and salaries for every industry in the country. And you can see that you can vouch for me, financial activities. We are not getting that high wages right now. What the sector that is getting the highest wage increases, is leisure and hospitality, which is the cheapest sector. I mean, Orlando has lots of hospitality workers, and these guys are getting the highest increases in salaries and wages today. Why? Because we are living la vida loca again. Yes, we are going out, we are eating outside, we are gathering, doing conferences in open spaces, traveling, yes? We are enjoying ourselves after 2 years of not doing anything. And these people the opportunity cost of re-engaging in this industry is very high today compared to the past, because they can get COVID because they are permanently interacting with individuals. So it has been very, very difficult for the leisure and hospitality industry to get back people engaged in their industry. And the only reason has been to increase wages and salaries in order to bring people in. Having said that, this industry, I mean, all the industries have already surpassed the levels of employment of pre-recession. This industry is behind 1.2 million workers. So if you go to a restaurant and you don't get served, if you order your food and instead of 20 minutes it takes an hour and a half, it is because they don't have workers. Yes? Because they are still struggling, even with these high wages, wage increases, they are still struggling to get people re-engaged in this industry. And you can see, I mean, these darker blue bars are all service sectors of the economy. The two lighter bars are goods producing sectors, manufacturing and construction. So the service sector is still in very good place today. So and of course, this is inflation. So this dashed line is inflation. So yes.
I'm looking at financial activities. What does that refer to? Because I'm in the financial world, and it's not that.
Well, I mean, so remember that this is not your salary. Okay. This is the increases in salaries and wages over the years. So
For how many years?
from last year.
Okay.
So and this is not you. This is millions of people.
Okay.
So you are.
Accounting is definitely taking over.
Like 40%.
I mean, I guess the New York financial guys that get $200,000 bonuses per year are in your group. But I am not talking about those.
No,
I am.
a two-year person has a 40% increase.
In salary?
2 years.
I'll send you my card. I'll send you my card, my business card. Okay, so because this is happening, real wages, which is the purchasing power of wages, is coming down. Yes? So you can see that real wages, or the purchasing power of wages, was stagnant since 2001 up until 2015. And then it started to go up. And then it started to go down again when inflation started to increase.
Since Jeff asked this question, I feel compelled. In the service industry, the staff went down, and it has not come back.
Correct.
Why?
Because my guess is that, well, I'll talk about that later. If you wait, I have some answers. Yes. One of the answers is that there's people that don't want to get back because they are afraid that they are going to get COVID. That is one of the reasons. There's a second reason. There's about from 1 to 4 million people that have long COVID, that they have not been able to go back to the labor force. And then there's my wife. She worked because she wanted. She enjoyed working at a school. Then we brought my parents to live with us, and then she had to quit to take care of my parents. And now she's not going back. There's a lot of people that don't need to go back, correct? That have been working and they're no longer working.
Yeah.
So don't tell my wife that I said this. But anyway, so this is the reason why, I mean, one of the reasons why the labor market is so strong today is because it is very cheap to hire workers. In real terms, purchasing power of wages has come down because inflation is very high. Yes? So that is one of the reasons why they are not coming back also. Okay, so this is what has happened to the US economy, and always remember when I talk about the US economy, remember the potential output concept. And remember that today, potential output growth for the US economy is 1.8%. Look at the growth rates of the US economy getting out of the recession. 40%, 4%, 6%, 7%, 7%. The economy is booming. It is not growing, it is booming. Of course, we have our issues because inflation is very high. So some of us have trouble too. I'll call you and get your advice when I am talking to my boss to get a raise. Yes? But anyway, whoops. No, restart now, no. Who is, did I do that? Okay, so the third quarter of the year, we had a growth rate of 2.6%. But we had two negative rates in the first two quarters of the year. And of course, there's many people that say that 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth is a recession. I mean, I disagree. Actually, in the US, there is an institution, which is not a governmental institution, that is called the NBER, that determines whether we were in a recession or not. And they take a long time, almost a year and a half, to actually determine whether we were in a recession or not. So once they determine that whether we were in a recession, my gut feeling is that they are going to say, no, we were not in a recession during the first 2 quarters of the year. By the way, I don't know if you follow something like this, but I am a data nerd, so I look at the Atlanta Fed. If you want to look at the Atlanta Fed nowcast for GDP growth for the fourth quarter of the year, they're estimating 4.2% growth in the fourth quarter. So it's not only slowing down, it's actually accelerating. Economic growth in the US is actually strengthening today. That won't last for a long time, but it is actually strengthening today. Okay, so 70% of the US economy is personal consumption. This is consumer demand. And this is real numbers. You can see how personal consumption expenditures grew by almost 50% in the third quarter of 2020. And it has been very strong. Actually, you can see that consumer demand never experienced a recession in the first 2 quarters. And it's still growing relatively strongly. Actually, yesterday's retail sales numbers were very, very strong. So Americans are still consuming. Let me show you this because this is very interesting. This is the personal savings rate. This is savings as a percentage of disposable income or take-home pay. And that number was at about, before the Great Recession, about 3.5%. It went to 35% during the pandemic recession, and now it's back to 3.5%. But what is happening is that for 2 years, what Americans have been doing is just hoarding money. Yes? It is estimated that $2.7 trillion were hoarded during this period, where we're getting a lot of money and not spending because we could not get out. Yes? What does that money do? It increases prices, because when we start spending, and we have been spending like crazy, prices go up. Look at this. This is, the black line is personal consumption expenditures, real consumption expenditures. And the blue line is real disposable income. So at a time that we were not consuming at all, we were earning a lot of money. We had a $1,200 check from the Trump administration in April 2020. We had a $600 check from the Trump administration in 2020, and because Mr. Biden didn't want to feel bad, he put out a check of $1,400 in March of 2021. And then there was PPP, yes? And I have been told that there's a lot of new Ferraris and Lamborghinis and very nice cars running around. And you know, the government has no clue of where that money went, yes? But it went to consumers and business owners, correct? But anyway, you know, I worked for the petroleum industry, and when I was very young, and my friends said, "Oh, have you heard that they are paying $100 per hour on a rig in the middle of the North Sea? Yes, $100 an hour. Why don't you go and work there if you want to increase your income?" What do I do with $100 per day if I am in the middle of the North Sea? What you do is save money. Yeah, that's the only thing that you can do. So it's as if the US economy was in the middle of the North Sea on a rig, just accumulating money, waiting to be deployed when we were in dry land. And now we have been in dry land for several months, and we are spending like crazy. Yes, as if there's no tomorrow. Of course, inflation is affecting our expenditures because everything is more expensive. But we still have, the estimate is that we accumulated $1.7 trillion of excess savings during the pandemic. The estimate is that we still have $1.7 billion to spend. So that means that the consumer is going to remain relatively strong for the foreseeable future. Okay, this is one of the reasons why we believe that we were not in a recession in the first 2 quarters or 10 months of this year. This is the rate at which we create jobs in the US economy on average per month, 120, 125,000 per month. We have been creating jobs or recovering jobs at about 420,000 per month during these first 10 months of the year. This is not a recession. It feels like one, but it is not. Yes? It feels like one because we are not used to very high inflation. This is another measure that we look at. This is all the previous, the blue bars are all the previous recessions in the US back through history, and how employment behaved 12 months before the start of the recession. So you can see that the 0 here is the start of the recession, and what happened 12 months before to employment, and compared to this cycle. And you can clearly see that there's no comparison. We are not in a recession, and we were not in a recession during that period. Okay. The same thing, employment growth, you can see over time when there are recessions and where there are no recessions. And this is unemployment rate and initial jobless claims. You can see that unemployment rate is at 3.7% today. It was 3.5% the previous month. The lowest unemployment rate in the history of the US is 3.4%. So 3.7% is very, very low. The labor market is very, very strong today, very, very tight. There's not enough people to work in this country.
But isn't that like your wife that isn't, she's not counted in that unemployment rate?
Correct.
So it's kind of not really accurate.
Oh yes, it is accurate, because that is the definition of the unemployment rate.
No, I know, but you've got a lot of people that are out off the workforce.
Correct, and you had a lot of people that were out before. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that is the definition of the unemployment rate. If you are looking for a job, then you are in the labor force. If you are not in the labor force. correct? I mean, if we want to change the definition, then that's fine, but this is the unemployment rate.
Well, again, tangibly, isn't that, are we changing the definition of a recession too? Because what's
No,
a recession? 2 quarters of negative growth?
No, no, no. We haven't changed the definition of the recession. No. It has never been 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. In the US, it hasn't.
That's that
It
one.
has always been determined by the NBER because they are the ones that measure the business cycle. And they are the ones that determine whether it is a recession or not. Yes.
And maybe you can address this down further along in the discussion. Anytime that I hear anybody talk about a recession, it is 100% of the time attached to gas prices. And everything I've seen on this presentation today tells me that we've got a great economy. Set for gas prices, and it was about a month ago, maybe less, where one of the oil companies kind of got in trouble with their earnings report that it was jacked price up 20% because it felt like it. You know, really, people are paying it, it's not going to lower. And that's when it, Biden got on there and was arguing about the war cost or whatever it is that they're doing. My point is, based on what you're showing, things should be going great, but it almost feels like there's this artificial perception of inflation based on one particular industry deciding to raise the prices.
No, it's not. So it is first of all, it's not artificial. First, let me show you this. So this is what, I mean, it's not only, and that's why I said this. Back in 2008, you can see that oil prices were going up. But the rest of the price of the economy were not. Today, everything is going up. That is the biggest difference between the increase in prices in 2008 and in oil prices. These are trickling down to the rest of the sectors of the economy. So that's why it feels even worse than back in 2008, even though oil prices are, gasoline prices are still very, very high. Yes.
Question from before the presentation. You have mentioned in the 70s and the increase in population, kind of bringing back to what you were talking about there, and then now, I think you said 1% or something.
Yes.
So, in relation to that, 1% now, 1% back then is a different number. So the numbers of people in the U.S. in the 70s versus 2022, 1% is way bigger now, right? So, and we do have an aging population. The borders are open over there. Texas, and people are coming in. So we're fixing it that way. So
If you call that fixing, it's okay. Yes. It's a matter of definition, yes.
just kidding. But anyways, so as a result of that, is that connected? Is that how?
Well, I mean, in the same way that population growth was 2% or 2.5% back then, and now is 1%, the economy is 10 times larger today. So in order to grow faster, we need more people actually than what we had before. Yes. Ma'am? Yes.
I'm just curious about kind of, is there layover looking at behaviors? I'm a social scientist, so I look at kind of, the different, this is different. So when you're discussing what the definition is, when a recession is, you can't ignore the impact of the pandemic and how it has changed behavior, perception of choice, expectations in the workplace, what I'm willing to go back to, what I'm not willing to go back to. And
Yeah.
granted, it may be rational, maybe completely irrational, but at this point it's reality. I'm just curious whether or not we lay over on top of this for some of the missing pieces, that this is a new added like kind of variable that, we looked at behavior economics before, but this is a different variable I think right now that we need to really explore kind of what the impact.
Yeah, I'm just talking about broad data comparing today's unemployment rate, like he says, to 50 years ago unemployment rate. The reason why we can compare is because it's the same definition. It's still made out of whatever it is made. The good thing about statistics is that you might be wrong, but if you have to be consistent across time, correct? The problem is when you start changing the definition every time that you measure it. So that will give you very different. And yes, we do not include behavioral data here, no. But it might be a very interesting thing to do, yes. I'm a political scientist also before my economics raise up, so yes.
So close to the holidays and still have this now is because we perceive in our industries a panic regarding this recession because the last couple of recessions have been when we've had a situation where the entire world was in a massive recession and recession. So that is first panic, and that's why we really like it when it comes.
There's a perceived, there's absolutely perceived choice that might not be accurate, right?
Yeah.
So aren't we actually dealing more with an artificial situation of the young ones supply?
Of one?
The young ones supply. So when the government comes to $2 million in the economy, people are spending money that they don't necessarily have, right? Free money.
Oh, they do have.
Well, yeah, but I mean, still,
Yeah. I mean, there was a very large increase in M1 and M2 in money supply, but it wasn't the Federal Reserve, correct? So it was fiscal policy. So we got $1,200 for everybody, $600 for everybody, and $1,400 for everybody. And
It's not just that, it's also the business. I mean,
yes.
you look on here, and aside from Ford and Clinton, you can kind of see when certain people are in office, certain groups are in office and not, right? I mean, looking at inflation, you could see Carter, you could see Obama.
I mean, if I
take
take,
Ford out of it, take Clinton out of it, because both of those guys kind of tried to.
I call Clinton the best Republican president in the history of the U.S. But let me tell you this: if I take the years out of here, you cannot tell what presidency it was. You can't by looking at inflation. You can't.
So it's just coincidence?
What? I mean, this was.
Look at the 80s. Look at late 70s,
Well,
early 80s.
Nixon, Carter, Reagan, and then I mean, if you look at that from a political definition, you cannot tell who was there. I have 2 more minutes, so we can talk this over drinks. But anyway. So let me show you this. This is the biggest problem that we have. This is the biggest problem that we have. This is participation rate. This is the labor force participation rate. So this is how many people are willing and able to engage in the labor force, correct? My wife is not here because she's not looking for a job. Whoever is not looking for a job is not here, yes? But you can see that this number peaked in 2000. And since then, it has been coming down, mostly because of baby boomers retiring, yes? The estimate is that 10,000 baby boomers retire per business day today. And it is going to take until 2027 for that process to end. And let me tell you, those that are coming behind, I mean, the experience that these people have, I mean, I have 3 millennials. They think that they should have been chosen as CEOs of their companies, yes? Because they think that they know everything. But the amount of experience that we are losing every day in the economy is unbelievable. And you can see here that the participation rate continued to decline until about 2015. And then it started to slightly move higher. Let me show you what happened in 2015. Real wages started to go up. So that started to attract people that were not willing to work into the labor force again. And that's why it started to move up. But then the pandemic hits, and then we have less people today because we have 1.2 million Americans that are no longer alive because of COVID. About 30% of those were able to work. The rest were retired. And then there are estimates of 1.1 to 4 million Americans that have long COVID. Yes? And nobody knows how long COVID is going to be. So it is very, very difficult to grow this size of an economy at a higher rate with such shortage of workers. And I don't know if they are coming through the ceiling or the floor or the borders or anywhere else, but we have to fix it because otherwise we will not be able to grow fast. Let me show you interest rates. Housing market is entering a recession. Prices are coming down. I know that I don't have much time, but you can see industrial production is still going up. That's another indicator that we were not in a recession in the first half of the year, because normally manufacturing and industrial production go down during a recession. This was not the case this time. Manufacturing is still expanding, but very weak. And the service sector is booming. We are still going out, spending a lot of money. So, of course, consumer confidence is low, but it's not very different than the last 50 years. So we can argue that we are always depressed. Yeah? It doesn't matter what government we have, but anyway. And this is the best news that I have. Debt as a percentage of disposable income is at 90%, 91%, and we were at 125% back in 2008. But that doesn't matter, right? That was a joke also. What matters is how much we pay for it. Yes? And that is at a historic low. Of course, there are some caveats here. One of the reasons for this to be so low is because we are not paying student loans, correct? So this is expected to go up in the future because this student loan issue is going to, presumably everybody's going to have to start paying back student loans in January 1st, or starting January 1st. So, but we are in a much better position to confront a recession today than what we were back in 2008. So this is my view for the economy. So this year, 1.9%. Last year, we grew by almost 6%, so more than 3 times faster than what we could have grown, given our resources. And then this year, 1.9, next year, 0%, so flat, and 0.8% for 2024. So I expect the recession to start in the second quarter. And let me answer the question about the 2 consecutive quarters of. So if I forecast a recession, I will forecast a recession showing consumer demand going down, exports going down, investment going down, and even imports going down. One of the reasons why this was not a recession, this was not considered a good measure of recession, which was the first quarter of this year, is because I don't know if you remember your Economics 101, GDP or the economy is consumption plus investment plus government expenditures plus exports minus imports. Why do we take out the imports? The reason for that is because consumption has imports, because we import a lot of consumption goods. Investment has imports because we import a lot of investment goods. Government expenditures also have imports because we actually purchase. The US government purchases from outside. So once we sum consumption, investment, and government expenditures, we have to subtract imports. Yes? And when we did that in the first quarter, it took away 3.2 percentage points of growth. Yes? So the economy grew by 2%, the domestic economy, but because we purchased a lot of goods from outside, it subtracted 3.2 percentage points of growth. So it wasn't that the domestic economy was very weak, it was that inventories had gone so low that firms actually purchased so much during the first quarter of the year that it pushed the economy into a negative territory. So that's why that quarter is not considered to be negative, really negative. And that's why I forecast this, but it would never have what the characteristics of what this first quarter had. So I know that this is confusing. A very good friend of mine always says to me, every time that I explain something to him, he says, Eugenio, thank you very much for your explanation. I am still confused, but at a higher level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julio.
Hey,
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, it's hard to stop that, right? You know, all I can say, and this is what I've been saying, I thought that the economy was going to start to hit some issues Q1, Q2. That's what I heard 2 months ago. But I think because of this right over here, it pushed us out. But we kind of see that this is an issue.
And this is coming at 4%.
Yeah.
So just imagine.
So the issue here is, what do we do now? Okay, what do we do with this information? And so we assembled a group of experts, and I'm going to ask Jared Caliquet from Valencia College to come up and introduce our panel. This will hopefully help the rubber meet the road, right, Jared? Okay. Yeah, hopefully. But we have some business experts, and my own Jed Brennan, my partner from Brennan Fender, is going to be joining us as well as a few other folks. So Jared, it's your show.
Thank you so much. Let's give it up for Dr. Allman. Thanks again. I myself is definitely in that, I'm still confused, but at a much higher level. We were chatting a few moments ago, and I think because of the pandemic and because of the unprecedented nature of the pandemic, a lot of things that we knew to be true about the world and the economy is no longer the case. And so folks like Dr. Allman are at the forefront of figuring out what the new normal is in terms of our work and our markets and all the rest. But with that being said, we have an end of year to get ready for, and you all have businesses that you're busy working in and so forth. And so there's a lot of things that the folks that I'm about to introduce to you are going to recommend that you start doing. And if you're not doing already, you're going to have a long list. So get out some paper to write some notes. But I'm going to introduce our panelists. First up is Scott Bradley. He's Senior Vice President and Commercial Relationship Manager at South State Bank. Scott advises business owners and executives with various financial needs and acts as their advocate at the bank. Come on up. Scott, thank you. We can clap for him. It's a long journey from the audience. Next is Jen Brennan, founder and managing partner for CPA firm Brennan & Fender. And I'm sure we've heard Jeff talk about it, but the company specializes in providing solutions through financial clarity, and its 60 personnel focus on your success and peace of mind. As a native Floridian, Brian Mills has spent 20 years advising clients through all types of business matters, and complex transactions, and with 7 of those years as a sole practitioner, providing first-hand experience in starting and operating a business. Brian is a member of Maynard Hoopers, Government Solutions Group with a focus on general counsel, M&A, and government contracting services. And then last but not least, we have Glenn Griffiths, who has 22 years of experience as a certified financial planner, professional leading a comprehensive fiduciary practice, Griffiths Wealth Strategies. So I'd like to start out the panel, if we could. Obviously, we've got an array of expertise and backgrounds up here. But I'd like to start out the panel with the question of what should business owners be doing right now, getting ready for the end of the year, from each of your particular lenses, if we could.
There you go. I'm in the CPA business, so I'm going to focus on tax planning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. We're a big planning firm, so we really suggest that you sit down with your CPA and before year end, take a look at what your tax burden would be or your opportunities to reduce your tax burden. We believe that planning is good for basically 4 reasons. One is that typically you can figure out what you owe so that April doesn't come as a surprise. 2 is that if you have an opportunity to use your tax between the day you meet with your CPA and the end of the year, you can take advantage of those. 3 is that you may be overpaid. You know, most of your business owners, you may be making estimated payments. You may be overpaid, you don't need to make that fourth payment. We all know that getting money back from the IRS these days takes forever, especially if it's a paper file return. The fourth big reason is a pretty simple reason, is that you don't want me or your CPA figuring out what you owe on April 13th at 10 o'clock at night when we're tired. So leave with your CPA today or before the end of the year and take advantage of any opportunities to reduce your tax, or at least know what you're going to owe before the end of the year.
Bill.
Can you guys hear me? So, as a banker, I would actually jump right in on what Jed was talking about as far as planning. So, it's a great time to plan, and it was mentioned earlier. Now is not a time to panic, I don't think. It's a time to plan. So, you want to look at, how your year went this year, what plans that you had for this year worked, what didn't, make adjustments to those, plan for things like maybe new equipment needs that you may need to look at, things like that, taking advantage of Section 179, things like that. It's a good time to plan for it, looking at what is on the horizon. One of the biggest things I can mention right now is interest rates. So if you have variable rate loans right now on your books, get those locked in. Rates have gone up. You've already missed the boat a little bit, but it's not over. Those rates are probably going to stay high for a little while. Get them locked in. The worst case scenario is that you lock them in, rates come down possibly at the end of next year or the year after. You can always modify those or renew those, revise those at that time. So I wouldn't panic, but I would prepare. I'd plan for that. And I would have those discussions, obviously, with your CPA, your attorney, your wealth advisor, investment planner. But don't forget your banker. Keep your bankers in the loop on those conversations. Don't forget, we have a lot of clients that we work with that may be in the same industry as you. So we do see some things. We want to know what's going on in your business. It helps us be better bankers. But we also can add advice and help. We see these things in other businesses and know how they reacted and what that impact was. So I would just plan.
Does it work? Can you hear me? Is it working? Hello? All right.
You want this one?
Technology. Is this working now? Am I supposed to be pressing the
It's on.
button? Can you hear me? It's me. It's you. A lawyer can't be heard. I guess as an attorney, my first bit of advice would be avoid all liability. If you're thinking about doing it, you had a question about it, don't do it. Don't do it. No. You know, I'd heard famously that or someone had told me once that your money in January is really made in August, right? And it's kind of a conversation about planning and trying to stay ahead of where you're at. As a business attorney, I think the thing that pops up in my mind that I'm seeing quite a bit of and was touched on with the speaker was the amount of baby boomers who are retiring or phasing themselves out of a large leadership role in their own company. And the thoughts there are turning to, you know, who's going to take over, who's my succession planning, essentially. Or do I want to sell my business? And what I'm finding, it's amazing to me how many businesses don't have any kind of buy-sell agreements or transition procedures already in place. And we end up having to kind of write those on the cuff, ratify that behavior, et cetera. The beginning of the year, you're going to get a notice for your annual report. That annual report is typically due later in the year around the May period of time. And most people just kind of blow that off until the last minute, and then they get on with SunBiz and they click that in. But I would encourage everybody to take that opportunity to say, okay, I have to file my annual report. Now is a good time, going into January, to have that conversation with my other partners, if I have any. If it's just me, then I need to have a conversation with my leadership team or my professionals, the accountants, the bankers, et cetera. Where am I going for 2023? And what do I want to accomplish? And are my governing documents set up in order to allow that? To avoid any kind of problems, you really need to be doing that on the front end as opposed to the back end. You know, with what I do and with asset protection, you know, they say the best time to protect your assets is 20 years ago. The second best time to protect your assets was 19 years ago. So I really encourage everybody to take that opportunity now to review those things and get those things done. A lot of folks just basically file on some of this and they go to work. And some of these, I've dealt with companies, they have no operating agreements. You know, it's a corporation, they don't have bylaws. They've got 3 partners, but there's no planning, there's no buy sells. What happens? Somebody dies. You know, next thing you know, the spouse or the child suddenly owns those shares and there's no control over it. You've got a brand new partner because you never thought, we'll work it out later. I'm dealing with people right now that we've gone through 20 revisions and we still haven't figured out how to do it. And this is a company that's been around for decades. Take the time to make sure that your foundation is secure before you start making those big, bold moves going into 2023.
We have also got a year-end tax planning worksheet. Allie's got some. If you raise your hand, she'll drop them off to you where you can have a chance to take a look at it. It's got a pretty good checklist of things that you might want to think of as a business owner that you need to think of toward the end of the year. And also with the Inflation Reduction Act happening toward the end of the year, there are a lot of provisions within that act that are very specific to industries that you may not know apply to you. And so that's where you really need to talk to your professional, I think. And Jed, that's probably where it becomes really pertinent. It's some of this stuff is very specific to a given industry and you may not know whether it applies or not, right, in regard to that. Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with credits.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So you really need to think about that before the end of the year because of those very specific types of provisions that might be in there. For me, just for general information and that I think is kind of helpful, is that a general principle in our profession is that you want to realize your losses and prolong and try to keep your gains unrealized. And this provides one silver lining I think I can say in the markets we've had in the past year is that there is a wonderful opportunity to be able to take some tax loss harvesting at the end of the year. And typically we've always done that for clients that had after-tax investments and they held individual stocks because it's very simple to see, okay, I have this stock, it's down for the year, I'm gonna sell it, go into an index for 31 days. There's a called a wash rule where you have to stay out of that stock for 31 days after you sell it. But that is your typical tax loss harvesting has been done historically. This year, because the losses are so large and they're basically over almost every sector that we're involved in, you've got an opportunity to look, even if you're a mutual fund owner, on an after-tax basis to do tax loss harvesting. It's very hard to do that for a mutual fund because the entire fund has to be down, right, to be able to sell it. But this is a situation where it works for you in that regard. So where you typically would have very specific clients that you do tax loss harvesting for, now we tell everybody, take a look at what you have, and if you've got after-tax investments, there may be an opportunity there to take advantage of that. And I would certainly take a look at that.
Question for you. Is the same thing, man? Is that same principle apply to cryptocurrency?
That's a really good question. It's unregulated, so I don't think you have to worry about the 31-day wash rule. So, no, it does not. That part does not apply. I guess I don't think you're going to be able to take that advantage. I can't really give you I've kind of stayed out of the cryptocurrency market, so I'm not a good person to give advice in regard to that, to be honest with you.
I can tell you, I don't want to be on that list of folks that are being sued currently because of the collapse, and I don't want to be down in Miami either when they have to rename their stadium. So
yeah, you want some tax loss harvesting? If you've got FTX as an investment, you've got a great opportunity for tax loss harvesting.
There's a lot of McLarens for sale right now. It's a good market.
Yeah, all those sports cars that the economist was talking about, they're all for sale. So you can get some good deals. As Brian was mentioning, especially with the operating agreements and your paperwork and all these things, one of the things about business is everything's going great until it's not. And I certainly have had experiences, I'm sure many of you have had experiences where you think, okay, everyone's going to act rational. They're a good guy, they're a nice lady, they're all going to act rational, and all of a sudden you hit a snag and everyone acts anything but rational. As we heard our chief economist talk tonight, with the recession not quite here, but it looks like it's being forecasted as on the horizon. One of the things that we did have when we were preparing was a really nice chart that showed all of the recessions going all the way back to the Great Depression. And what we're looking at that chart, the average rebound is 36 months for a recession. That's the average, okay? What that means is there's light at the end of the tunnel, provided we can make it to those 36 months, right? And so even if we feel that we're going into a recession, there might be some slowdowns, but as we talked about earlier,
that's really specific to the market, though. What you're talking about more is, right, that 36 months is really the market itself because it's moving so much quicker and down so much quicker than the overall economy.
Absolutely, yeah. So with that being said, I've got the Raymond James year-end tax planning sheet right here. And going into the end of the year, I want to talk a little bit about retirement planning. I know no one in the audience is thinking about that quite yet, but kind of similarly, Brian was saying with the plan, when's the best time to protect your assets? It was 20 years ago. When's the best time to start thinking about retirement? Pretty much before you start working. What are some things that you all would recommend in terms of retirement planning, especially with the current state of the economy and the laws that are going on right now, these different acts and so forth? Maybe we'll start with Jen.
Yeah, one of the one of the benefits that occurred 2 years ago is they allowed us to create pension plans now after the year end. It used to be if you were going to have a profit sharing plan or a defined benefit plan, it needed to be set up by year end. Now it can be done later. So one of the things that we've done with a lot of clients is that we've set up these plans, and the return's not due for that plan until like October 15th. But I think those in the market will tell you the plan has to be set up by July 15th because that's when the extension needs to be filed. So if you're thinking of retirement plans, you don't have to rush to do it by the end of the year. You can do it afterwards. The exception is the 401k plan. The 401k plan does need to be set up by the end of the year. And actually, if you're going to set up a safe harbor, it's really too late. It should have been done by October 1st. But if you're a sole practitioner, one of the things that we have really seen a great benefit is setting up an aggressive pension plan and being able to put a lot of money away very quickly. I think Glenn would probably say that you want that plan to be in existence for 5 to 7 years. The IRS would want that. I think there is exceptions to that if you close your business or something like that. But
the one person's too, or the deadline isn't up on that either. So you've actually got time where it would be much more complicated for a firm that has a lot of employees. If you're a self-proprietorship or you know somebody who has a single person business, that deadline's not until like the second week of December. So they've got a little bit more time to be able to get that paperwork in because it's so much simpler than a normal business. Yeah, you can get that year, you can actually make that year in.
You know, the other thing with pension plans, most of the investments are in securities, and with the market being down, it's not a bad time to start funding a retirement plan because hopefully the 36-month turnaround is going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to punt on a little bit of this because I'm a Gen Xer. My generation entered the workforce in 2008, and we were supposed to hit our financial stride in 2021. So, we're not doing so hot as far as that's going. But let me will say this though: I was a solo practitioner, and I think if you are a solo practitioner, or well, that's a legal term. Let's just say a small business owner, a single member, that sort of thing. What he just discussed is just phenomenal. I took advantage of it. It was really, really great. I mean, I'm employed now and I've got the company 401k going. But if that is something that you're eligible for, I can't recommend enough to do that.
And I would like to talk about some of the realities that people kind of are feeling about and from a market standpoint. There are some things that have happened that are very grave in this past year. The bond market, in regard to the downturn in the bond market this year, was probably the lowest since the 1700s. So when we talk about having something that's really unique, that's been hit dramatically, if you have a 401k plan, there was really no place to go to safety other than a bond fund or something that had bonds or a money market, right? You're straight cash, or you're in a bond market, and in most people that are in a target fund that are based on your age and your retirement, there's a specific percentage as you get older that's going to increase in regard to those bond funds. And we're looking at a mid-length bond now that the decrease in the bond value is probably, I think it's approximately 25% this year. So the safe money that people felt they were comfortable with, that they thought they were putting to the side that wasn't in market risk, is all of a sudden down 25%. And that's a dramatic thing for people to get through, and 401ks really didn't have an alternative to provide a way to get away from that. And that's a reality that everybody's had to deal with. I thought I had safe money. I thought I had something to put out of the market. I thought I was trying to protect my family. And in the end, you're still down 25%, which is as bad really as almost any sector within the equity market, within the bonds that you hold. And to me, I think that's where more of the, concerns for the individual person have been very dramatic. And in after-tax money, there have been a lot of alternatives that you could utilize that didn't have the interest rate risk of bonds. And I would talk to your professional about what alternatives are out there other than bonds, if that's the primary way in which you've had your fixed income and provided some of your safety. That being said, 24 months from now, bond market's probably going to be one of the best we've had in probably 2 years too. So talking to someone about that is very important.
Let me add to the pension thing. One of the things that we do a lot is we all know that our spouses help us in many ways, and they deserve to be paid. So if you do have a business with, you say you're a single member LLC, and so you file as a Schedule C, and you want to set up a 401k, pay your wife or your husband, whoever is your spouse that's supporting you, the minimum amount so they can maximize that contribution. It's a quick way to double your ability to save. The 401k plan, if there's two of you now, and depending on your age, but can put away somewhere between $45,000 and $60,000 very easily. The other thing that I would say is that because of the value of your account may be down, it may be a good time to do a Roth conversion. Is that your taxable amount will be less because the value of the account is less, especially if you have, your income's down because of the recession or just, certain circumstances in your business. But take a look at converting money from NYRA to a Roth this year as well.
I probably should have grabbed the mic first because I'm going to kind of do the same that Brian did. There's not a whole lot I can add to that discussion. What I can tell you, I've been a banker long enough to know that you can't be an expert at everything when it comes to the financial world. So, and you can be a generalist to an extent, but then you need to bring in the experts. And so, you know, what I do is I have relationships with those type of folks. I have these conversations with business owners, and so I know who to bring into those conversations.
Absolutely. So going into the, I've got just a couple more questions, and then I think I'd like to open it up to see what you all have to ask. You know, going into the end of the year and getting ready for a possible slowdown, what is the most important thing that folks should be thinking about in terms of not only year end but year beginning going into next year from each one of your lenses? Maybe one or two things that they should really be thinking about, or should be on the phone on the way home with their person, banker, wealth advisor, etc.
I'll go ahead and take that one first. So, and I had already touched on a little bit earlier as far as interest rates. So if you have variable rates, get those fixed. I talked a little bit about planning. You know, include in those plans when you're having discussions, you know, with your accountant, your attorney, your investment person, include your banker in those conversations so they can be aware of the conversations you're having and kind of what's on your horizon, what your plans are. Don't forget, your banker is going to be your advocate at the bank. So in order for us to really be able to do a good job, we need to know you. So I would urge you to have those conversations on a regular basis with your bank. You know, some companies that may be once a year because there's not a lot of changes. Other companies that could be quarterly. You may have regular discussions with what's going on in your business, how things are changing. And I would say heading into this year again with some uncertainty, the biggest piece of advice I think I can give you right now is after going through the last downturn and watching, you know, what happened with clients that I had. It's looking at preparing and being aware of what's going on in your business, knowing your numbers, being prepared to react. Don't wait. I saw too many companies in the last downturn that waited. They were slow to make decisions. Keep an eye on your receivables. Keep an eye on your collections. Keep an eye on your inventory. All of those things are extremely important, and you need to make decisions quickly when it comes to those. And keep your banker aware of what's going on so we can be your advocate and have those conversations for you and help you.
I'll pile on Scott and say the one thing that surprises me more than anything in my career is the number of businesses that don't create budgets for the coming year. I mean, they just don't do it. And cash, we know, is king, right? Especially in downturn. So I would suggest everybody, if you haven't done it, create a budget and cash flow for 2023 and have a stress test to that. Meaning that if things do go south, then you know what your steps are going to be to ensure that your company survives. Because, you know, it's devastating to let people go or something like that. But if you survive your company in the future, then maybe there's an opportunity to hire those people back. If the company goes down, then everybody goes down.
Just to kind of, I guess I'll piggyback on that, but I think the thing that I think about, particularly in the last couple of months, and Jeff, you know this, we were at an event recently in Melbourne, so I just want to make sure that as a business owner, that your decisions are being made based on the intelligence that you receive from your own personal commercial universe, in the sense of keep up the constant communication with your clients, keep up the constant communication with your vendors and your suppliers, figure out what they're doing, hear what they're doing. Don't turn on the television and have somebody on there say, it's going to hell, and say, well, I gotta lay off half my staff because I can't, you know, it's going to hell, what am I gonna do? Those people get paid to create chaos. You talk to your folks who come in the door, what are you doing? What are you seeing? That is the best windsock for your business that you can get. And ignore all the noise. And I think if you do that, whether we have a large recession or a small recession or no recession, you'll do that much better, because unless, you know, we're a community, and the community is what's going to end up affecting you at the end of the day.
The last presentation we had were from people who had succession planning, where they were a new generation of family members that were taking over a business for their family. And I think the person that came up with this phrase was a very conscientious person, a person who may not be willing to do some of the things that they want to. And they said, what was some wisdom they wish they had when they took over their family business? And it phrase kind of shocked me, but I think it's something at least worth thinking about. And it is, she wished she had been quick to fire and slow to hire. And that may go a little bit, that doesn't mean do it in a panic. That means do it in a thoughtful way, that it does my budget and what's going to happen with me in a recession going to allow me to support the employees in the group that I have. So it's not doing it in a panic basis, but what she had to say was what she thought was the most wise phrase that she could have heard when she was coming in to have that business for her family. And I've never looked at it that way, and it hit me. So not from a panic standpoint, but from a way that maybe it makes some sense budgetarily, especially when you don't put a good thorough budget together in the first place.
Absolutely. Going off that.
I've got a question.
Oh, we have a question?
So I'm looking at this, at these statistics, and I'm looking at 36 months, but I'm also looking at what you, Eugenio, shared, where Q2, 3, into 4, we're going to have negative growth. Okay? So in the context of that, it looks like today, like now, people would be in their highest income levels probably in the last few years, right? So I'm going to go to Jed, and I'm going to go, okay, if we're planning today, you know, and we know that income technically could be lower next year, what do we do from a planning standpoint, tax planning standpoint? What do we want to take advantage of today?
Gee, thanks, Jeff. Well, again, I mean, if your income's going to be lower, that means your cash flow is going to be less. So you better plan for your cash flow and make sure that you have sufficient reserves to make it through that downturn. And if you don't, then you need to figure out, you got to go to Scott and make sure before you run out of money that you've already got Scott to give you a line of credit so you can make it through that downturn.
Why not jump in on that? So yeah, you know, a lot of times, again, back to being aware of what's going on in your business and acting quickly. Now is the time to try to get those lines of credit. If you've had a good year, get those in place so that you've got, you know, that backup. And Jed touched on it a little bit as well. Balance sheet, okay? Liquidity and leverage, you need to keep those things in check right now, because if they get out of hand and then you come to the bank and you're looking for help, at that point it's a lot harder for us. So don't forget, you know, banks are highly regulated. When they come in, they look at the loans that we've made, and they look at the safety and soundness. They grade the safety and soundness of our bank based on those loans. So we're having to make sure that we're making prudent decisions when we put those loans on the books. We want to help you. We want to provide those loans that you need for growth. We want to provide those loans that will help you get through a tough time. Having that conversation, those regular conversations, is how to help do that. Because if you come to me and you say, I know I haven't talked to you ever, but I need help like tomorrow or yesterday, it's a lot harder for me to get behind and understand from nothing to the whole history of your business and then explain that to who I need to talk to in credit to get that done. If I have regular conversations and we know kind of going in what's happening and we can help you plan for it, that's when we can really help. So.
It reminds me of the old adage, it's really easy to make friends when things are going well. It's really hard to make friends when things are going bad.
I'm good.
Good? I would bring up two very basic investment principles. One would be rebalancing, because you've seen so much on the tech side where we've gotten hit. Just the basic thing of taking your portfolio, taking a look at what you would historically have in your different allocation percentages, and be willing to just do a rebalance of what your existing investments are. And if you have new cash that might be available to you, to be in the equity market. Timing is a very fickle friend, and everyone wants to be able to try to time when they want to put those investments in. And I would highly suggest dollar cost averaging that in over a time frame in which you're comfortable, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and not sitting there being afraid to pull a trigger that never happens. I think it's a much better thing just to dollar cost average some of those new funds.
My next question, kind of going off that, you had a question? Go ahead.
Well, interestingly, I rushed over here from a client planning meeting. We're in the midst of 2023, mapping out what he and his leadership team need to do, not just next year, but 2024. We started with Destination 2024. So over the past few weeks, we've really created a view of his business in the future based on what he thinks he can execute on, how he's going to grow it. And I'm reassured to hear from the panel that we're touching on all the right things from the standpoint of planning and preparation. And the one thing that came out of this session today with the client was where can we be optimistic and doubt? So there's holding back, there's preparing, there's being cautious, but he's in a commercial universe where we decided today there's going to be a strategy to do vendor management, negotiate better pricing through next year, because he knows a lot of his vendors need business. And secondly, he's going to his customers, and he does service work in the commercial building world. And it's usually project by project, but he's developed a game plan to give preferred pricing to customers if he packages multiple projects over the course of 12 months. So I think the point made many times here about planning and sitting thoughtfully with your leadership to think about the next 12 or 24 months could lead to some interesting growth opportunities in the midst of a troubled economy.
Well, I think I would take what you say and double down what the good professor mentioned earlier, that in a way the rules are kind of out the window. And, you know, chaos can be an opportunity. And to your client's point, the people who are the innovators are the ones I think that will be the most successful. So I wish him luck.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he was mentioned earlier, but one of our former presidents said that it's the economy, stupid. And then somebody else said that all politics is local.
George Orwell.
So you put those two things together, and all economics is local at some level, which the panelists talked about. You know, reaching out to your folks, the folks that you do business with, both your suppliers and your customers, clients, etc. Find out what they're experiencing and kind of make a plan, and don't pay attention to the talking heads as much. With that being said, estate planning is one of those things that is probably on everyone's to-do list, but I don't know how many folks have actually gotten down to do it. When is the best time to estate plan, and what kind of things should people be thinking about in their estate plan regarding taxes, leadership transitions, you know, all the rest of it?
Well, they say the best time to do estate planning is 2023.
Go right in. I think whenever you have a lower business valuation, when you have someone who is willing to provide you a lower valuation for your business, that is a wonderful time to consider going ahead and doing your estate planning. Limited family farm partnerships, I think, it's a wonderful time to take a look at the valuations of your business to be able to offset a portion of the equity of your business to the next generation potentially and reduce your estate taxes. So this provides a great opportunity in regard to that. It might just be the market, but when people are in that mindset of thinking that valuations are down, I think it's going to translate to business valuations. I don't know if you've seen that, Jed, or not, but I think it.
The one thing that it needs to be aware of, and not everybody, if you have a substantial estate, if you're not aware of that the unified credit is going to drop in half on 1/1/26. So if your estate today is more than 12 million, there's a lot that you need to be doing. So if you have an estate that's above 12 million, you need to be working closely with your estate planner. You know, there's ways to shift money between spouses. Brian, you probably know more than I do about a SLAT or something where you can move money now and forever take $6 million plus and move it out of your estate. You know, and if you do any estate planning less than that, you know, as Glenn mentioned about valuations, you always want to try to move assets that are going to appreciate in the future. You may want to talk about slabs.
Well, unfortunately, my trusted state's attorney couldn't make it here today, but I can more than happy to coordinate with her. But what I will say, and just kind of go back to one of my initial comments, something that I see a lot of people don't deal with is in terms of their own particular companies. If you have a partner or shareholders, you guys don't have that buy-sell agreement. And the conversation typically is, the five of us have a business. And we're all kind of long in the tooth up here. We were all eating the red meat back there, so who knows which one of us is going to drop dead. And, you know, these four guys, they may all have kids who are Harvard and MIT graduates. My kid's going, you know, he doesn't have a degree, maybe he'd rather play video games. But guess what? If we don't have that set in place, he's going to own a share of this business. I think one of the things that I'm constantly recommending is have that buy-sell agreement. If you do not want to have a partner or a majority shareholder or a significant minority shareholder, then you need to have some form of buyback provision. And the question then is, if it's going to be a buyback provision, how are you going to fund that? You have, you know, is Keyman insurance necessary in order to make that happen? A lot of people, when they do their estate planning, they think about, you know, the pour over wills and the trusts, and I want to set up a private foundation, that sort of thing, but they never think about the fact who's going to get those shares, and what do the rest of your partners think about who's getting those shares. It's a difficult conversation, because every single one of us thinks that we're Rupert Murdoch and we think our kids are going to come in. But the problem is, a lot of us are Rupert Murdoch and we have kids that we don't necessarily want coming in. So we got to have those difficult conversations and get that done sooner rather than later.
I think maybe one on the charitable. Also, business valuation really impacts too in regard to doing, if you have a charitable bid, charitable remainder trust now becomes something that's a really good option for people. And it's amazing, there's donor advised funds out there now where you can do charitable donations as low as $10,000 through donor advised funds that allow you to take advantage of those situations. So there's a lot of ways to use charity donations to assist and help.
Just say one more thing. One other thing, and just touch base on that. It's probably common knowledge, but I always like to talk about it. If you're looking at this type of estate planning as also an asset protection, if you're putting into it a trust and you can take that money out of the trust, it's not protected. As long as you have control over the trust, it is not protected. Irrevocable trusts are the only way that you can put that, particularly in Florida. Now, there are other states out there, Utah, Alaska, places like that, but Alaska's cold. So, you know, so is Utah. You don't want the irrevocable. So you gotta be mindful when you're doing this with the estate planning. What is the goal? Is it basically, like you say, create charitable foundations? If you got that sort of mindset, that's great. If you're doing this for an asset protection, that's an entirely different mindset and an entirely different conversation.
I'm going to open it up to the audience at this point. We've got about a little less than 20 minutes left in our panel. What are some questions that you have? You've got an entire array of folks, professionals. Jeff, you had a question?
So we're talking about, what do we do before year end? And again, I'm going to bug Jed because he's my partner in crime. But there's lots of conversation about the employer retention credit, some of these things that you do before year end that, again, it doesn't have to be in that case before year end. At the end of the day, there are some opportunities that are out there for business owners who are affected by the pandemic and whether or not they have been taking advantage of things like the employee retention credit. So I'm just throwing back again and saying, is that something that anybody here would want to take advantage of? And what are the pitfalls if you actually do it?
Well, as far as the employee retention credit, I would suggest that if you haven't looked at it from your business perspective, you need to do so. There are plenty quality tax specialty groups around the country that have done a very good job in positioning companies for the credit when the owners of that company thought there's no way that they would ever be able to receive that credit. So if you haven't checked into it, you really need to do so. The other thing that's kind of interesting when we were talking about the unemployment rate, where's Jerry still with us, about, you know, what is the real unemployment rate? But one thing that's probably maybe available to you this year that's never been available is that there's a work opportunity credit. That if you hire someone who's been unemployed for more than 27 weeks, there's a credit available to you. So whether you do your own payroll or you have a payroll service, ask the question, have we hired anybody in the last year who has been unemployed for 27 weeks? And the answer is probably, yeah, we have. So that's a very small credit, but it's half of $6,000. So if you hire 3 or 4 people, it's $12,000 credit. It's not a small amount. The other thing is, you know, this is the last year of bonus depreciation. You know, you can buy an asset now and depreciate it 100%. That's going down to 80% next year, and it's 60, 40, and then it's finally going to be phased out in 25. But if you own your own building and you haven't looked at a cost segregation study, cost segregation study basically allows you, through an engineering study, to change the depreciable life of your assets or the components of your building down to a smaller useful life. And if it's 15 years or less, you can take the bonus depreciation and get a big deduction in this year. So if you own your own building and you haven't looked at doing a cost segregation study, you may want to try to do so before the end of the year because of the bonus depreciation being 100%.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking that as you were talking about the employee retention tax credit. So that's a perfect example of conversations that I have with business owners when we're reviewing their financials, is I'll ask them things like that. I'm aware of them. Can I help them actually act on those? No, but I can refer them. And so we just tend to have, and if your banker doesn't, maybe you need a new banker. But you know, look at that information and go over it with the business owners, and then refer that on to the experts, you know, like Jed, or if it's legal, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, you should definitely be asking all these questions to your own professionals that you have, because there's a lot of credits and a lot of things that are out there that you know, as a business owner, you may not have any idea about, but the experts definitely know about. And there's no reason to leave money on the table. I mean, absolutely no reason in the world to leave the money on the table.
I have a question for Jed. You mentioned the work opportunity tax credit. Does it matter, is it prorated tax credit when that person is hired? Could it be the last day of the year? Could it be now? Does the credit get prorated?
No, it's basically, and I'm not an expert in this, but I'm giving you my best answer. It's 50% of the $6,000. So as long as you pay them $6,000, you can maximize the credit. So if you hire them the last day of the year, you probably won't get much.
Unless you hire Jeff.
Unless you hire Jeff.
So, other questions? Ask now why it's free. It won't be tomorrow morning.
That's another good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Because your bankers do have a lot of times general knowledge, and guess how much I charge compared to these guys. So it's not to say that I won't refer you to these guys because they are the experts, but I can help identify some of those things, and it's a free conversation. That's right.
Client has free jokes, you get free jokes.
No, I will mention one thing that I've seen over the last couple of weeks is I've gotten emails from clients who have told me, hey, I just talked to my broker or my money manager, and he's telling me we've got $150,000 of losses this year. What do we do about it? So if maybe you had a capital gain earlier in the year, you sold a piece of property, sold a building, even sold for business, you know, call your money manager and say, hey, do we have losses we can harvest before the end of the year? because there's going to be a nice opportunity. The other thing I would mention and this we see in this, if you did sell your business, there's a thing called a net investment income tax, which is, they call it the Obama tax, the 3.8 additional Medicare tax on interest, dividend, rents, and gains. A lot of people don't realize that when you do sell your business, that tax is not assigned to the income from the gain from that sale. We see a lot of tax returns for clients that we have inherited from the poor service where that tax has been applied to their tax return, and they end up paying 3.8% on a very large gain that they didn't need to pay.
I think there's a question back there again.
Yes, so I have a client, since this is free advice. I have a client that owns collectibles personally and is selling them and can make a very large profit off of these collectibles. What is the tax ramification of that? So let's say a baseball card or a football card.
Yeah, no, it is a special, it's a gain, it's a capital gain, but it's subject to a higher tax rate. And again, I don't have a lot of clients that have done that, but I believe the tax rate is 28% on collectibles.
This is a very basic state thing, and I apologize if a lot of you know about this already, but I am shocked by the number of people that I talk to that don't know what step-up in basis is in regard to investments or things that you might hold. If you have a collectible or something where you have a very low cost basis and the appreciation is very substantial, there are some advantages to holding off and waiting in regard to your next generation to have that, because when you pass away or your family passes away and they have a very low cost basis item, that value, that cost basis for the next generation and your heirs steps up to the current market value of those items. So collectibles, I'm sorry I kind of piggybacked on that, but it's one of the specific things that you hold for a lifetime. And then the next thing you do, you take a title to something and you put a joint because you're not sure your capacity is good enough, and you lose half of the step up in basis to a value on a property, or you take collectibles and you sell them just before you pass away rather than giving it to the next generation. I see it quite often. It's shocking how many people don't know about step up in basis as a fundamental thing that you need to consider before you sell an item that you've had in the family for a long time.
All right, I want to thank the panelists for spending time with us and answering all the questions for free. And I also want to thank Jeff. I'll turn it back over to him now.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, everybody, for being here. That's why we do these things, is we give really good input. This was a perfect time for us to meet up, and especially post-election. We didn't talk about the Inflation Reduction Act, but there's all sorts of credits that can come out of that. But at the end of the day, we're here to support education, give you what you need to make smart decisions, hopefully connect us with talent. And was there a student here?
I don't believe so.
Well, we were going to try to experiment, okay? So we have students here who are actually filming, okay, from Valencia College. But going into 2023, we are going to have students at each of these events. They're going to be from both Valencia College and Rollins. And they're going to be giving us summaries. And at the end of the day, we want to try to connect these students with business owners, but also, more importantly, they're going to get college credit. They're going to get these extra credit things. And Jared is, of course, part of the team, and I want to point to Paul Wilder. Paul is actually the dean in charge of, I think, 3 degree programs. Is that correct, Paul? 7. Lost track. There's 80 professors that report to this man. Okay, and Nasser Dad, he is the assistant vice president in charge of workforce placement. You get to know him, and you're going to be able to connect to all the folks that count at Valencia College to feed students and human capital to your company. So at the end of yes. Oh, it's Sherry Cutter. She is, of course, in charge of our business degree program, and I want to encourage you to speak with Sherry and each of these folks, because they've been great partners with us through the years, since actually 2016. So thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to seeing you in February, probably, is where our next event will occur. It'll be interesting to see, Eugenio, what happens with Georgia and some of these other things that will occur going forward and the impact on our businesses. But I want to thank you in particular for some great insights, and thank you for all coming. Thank you. Thanks so much. Oh, guys.